everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I like to talk about books, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of September. So let's jump right on into it. I read 19 books this month, so we have a lot of ground to cover, but I think I can get through it pretty fast. First, I'll say I finished Midnight Sun this month, but like I said in a previous video, I'm not going to talk much more about it than I already have. Didn't really love it. Chapters 26 and 27 were definitely my favorite and made it worth reading for me, but other than that, that's all I really have to say about it. Next, I read these 3 books, which I talk about in my 5-star predictions video, so I will link that above and below so you can check that out. The idea behind that video series is that I will predict 5-star reads, then I'll read them, and then I'll let you know if they were 5-star reads or not. So I haven't actually finished reading all 5 of them yet, so I don't want to spoil my ratings, but I will say the 3 that I read were The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, and Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. Once I finish all 5 of these, I will post side B of that episode where I tell you what I actually thought of these books, so stay tuned until then. I also read these 3 books in September. These were all part of a different book club, and I'm going to start making monthly videos where I make a reading vlog for reading the monthly book club picks that I read that month. So I don't need to say too much more about these either because I do have a full video giving all of my in-depth thoughts on these books, which I will also link above and down below so you can check those out. But to quickly summarize, I read Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jossi. This was the Read with Jenna book club pick, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Upon reflection, it might just be a 5-star. Either way, I really liked it. It is sort of a meditation on loss and grief and addiction and science and faith and religion. So if any of those topics sound interesting to you, I think you will really like this. It also has just beautiful writing. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this for the Late Night Book Club, which is hosted by a couple booktubers. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I have since reading it come to like it even more now that I have reflected on it and thought more about a couple of the themes that I wasn't recognizing at first. This story is about a Hollywood starlet. It is set in 60s, 70s, like back in time a little bit. And the premise of the book is that this actress, Evelyn Hugo, has lived her whole life. It's been like a crazy life. She's had 7 husbands. No one ever really knows what's going on with her. You get tabloid clips throughout, so you can kind of see how people have perceived her. And now that she has aged and she's towards the end of her life, she wants to do an interview with this person to do an exclusive tell-all where she explains who the one true love of her life was. It is definitely a very good book. I just had it a little bit spoiled for me from hearing too much about it, but like I said, you can get my full thoughts in that reading vlog. And then A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. I read this for the Crusty Book Club, which is hosted by Chanel of Chanel Time. I have a lot of tabs in this book. I definitely enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It is a young adult fantasy novel that is the start of some sort of series. I don't know if it's going to be a duology or a trilogy or a longer series, but it's also been optioned for television, so that's really exciting. It is about these 2 characters who end up in this sticky situation, and the only way they're going to be able to get out of it is if they kill the other one, and they don't know that. Really cool concept here, and definitely enjoyed the characters, the world building, and a lot about this book. I read a couple graphic novels this month. So the first 2 that I read are part of the same series, and that is the Heavy Vinyl series. I read these through Scribd, so I don't physically own them. I was looking at them as digital copies. My only complaint with them is they're so short. They're like 28 pages long each. So I read both of them really quickly. I really enjoy the concept of them. I don't want to say too much about them because when you start reading the first one, you don't really know what's going on. There's this girl who's working at a record store, and she's kind of the outcast. She has a crush on one of the girls, but they don't really seem to accept her. They like do things after work and like clean up, but then they tell her she can just go ahead and go home, even if she's like, no, I'll stay, because she's got a crush on this girl. She wants to like stay and hang out. And at the end of the first one, there's a big reveal that changes the whole story, and then the second one picks up on that, and then you get like a different story going on. Like I said, they're really short, really quick to read. I really enjoy them. There's a lot of badass queer women featured in them, and it's just generally super cute. I like the art style. I really just liked everything about them. I gave them both 4 stars, and I'll probably continue reading these, but it's just like tricky because they're so short. I wish it was just one thing. I don't know how many there are. I'll have to look into that, but I would definitely recommend them. I also read Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. I have put off reading this for so long because I don't really support Rainbow Rowell as an author. She has a lot of controversial things going on, and yeah, I just like to stay away from that. But it seems like everyone really loved this. Even people who have problems with her as an author recommend this graphic novel. So I don't know. I thought I'd give it a try. And I definitely see what people see, and like the art style, the aesthetic is all very cute and fall, but people act like this is the greatest graphic novel ever made, and it is not, folks. It is just not the best graphic novel ever made. There are certainly far better ones. The basic concept behind this is that there are these two characters who work at a pumpkin patch together. This is going to be their last time working at the pumpkin patch together before they like go off to college or whatever it is they're going to do with their lives. This guy has been crushing on a girl that works at the pumpkin patch this whole time, but he's never talked to her. And so his friend is like, we're going to get you to talk to her because this is your last chance. And then she's like hard to find, so they like go around the pumpkin patch. They're like exploring the pumpkin patch together, trying to get to this girl so he can have his one last shot with her. I'm gonna just go ahead and call this spoilers. If you don't want to know anything about this graphic novel, just skip this section when the spoilers bar isn't up anymore. I did not like the ending. I did not understand why they had to fall in love all of a sudden and kiss, and it just didn't feel right or genuine or natural at all to me. It just seemed like it came out of nowhere. And then the main problem I had with this is that this girl is like the fat girl, right? I mean, she's definitely the larger girl. And the whole time she was just eating food. Like it seemed like the writers were just shoveling food in her mouth. And then the other dude was never eating. Every time they went everywhere, it was just like, oh my gosh, I gotta eat this, I gotta eat this, I gotta eat this. And then they did kind of make that into her plot line where she's like, yeah, it's my last time here. I want to enjoy all the good food. I just would have felt less weird about it had he been eating too. So I just feel kind of weird about this, and I don't feel like it's the best graphic novel ever made. I feel like there's some things going on here, and this author's already controversial enough, so not sure if this is like a necessary read and if I would recommend it. But the art style is really nice and fall aesthetic. It's like them eating s'mores. Got a nice fall pumpkin patch vibe going on here. Cornfield. I don't know. I don't even know what to rate it. 2, 3. Definitely not a 5. And then I also read Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Gancho. And this is another graphic novel I've heard people say really good things about, but I just did not think it was that good. I think I'm gonna have to just like go on my own reading adventure for graphic novels, because all the ones people say they really love, I'm not enjoying them. And then the ones I'm just randomly kind of finding that I've never heard of, I really enjoy those. I don't know what's going on, but this was just not very good to me. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This story is about this boy whose family owns a bakery. When it starts, the guy is at his older sister's wedding and she is now getting married. She's gonna leave the bakery, and so he's gonna be like even more responsible for the bakery. But he doesn't want to be responsible for the bakery. He wants to move to the city and be a part of his band. And his parents are not supportive of that because they really need his help with the bakery because it's going under and they just can't afford other help, and they just really need support from him. And he just doesn't want to do it. He just wants to run off and be in his band. So he decides the way he's going to get out of this is he's going to find someone to replace him. So he puts out this ad. He's like looking for people to work for the bakery, and he finds this guy. That guy ends up working at the bakery, and then it's a love story from there, right? Like they fall in love baking. So the concept, really good. Love it. Love a soft, sweet, little cute bakery romance. Fun times. The relationship sucked. Like it was really toxic. The main character is the one who sucked too. Like I felt really bad for the other guy because the main character sucked so hard, and this is going to be spoilers too. So what happens with the main character that makes him so bad? So Ari is our main character whose family owns the bakery, and Hector is the one who's visiting and ends up working for the bakery. After a little bit of time that he's working there, Hector wants to go back and visit his friends, like go back home and visit his friends because he hasn't seen his friends in a while. And Ari gets so weirdly possessive about that and gets really upset at Hector, like, how dare you leave me? And he's like, I already asked for time off from your parents, like it's fine. And Ari's like, I just can't believe you would leave me alone, like you're my only friend. I mean, toxic. And then later, once they've kind of started like having a romance with each other, there is a kissing scene in the bakery, and like a towel ends up getting pushed into the oven as they're kissing, and then the bakery catches on fire. And then when the parents ask what happened, Ari just like lets Hector take the blame, or like even blames Hector for that, when it was like both of your faults, and how terrible that you would do that to him. It just was not a good relationship. And then in the end they end up together, and Hector like forgives him for all the toxicity, even though Hector calls out his toxicity multiple times. So I just could not get behind this. It was not a good relationship, not redeeming enough. Like I understand characters being flawed and having relationship problems, but there needs to be some kind of balance or like redemption or show flaw in the other character, or like don't make the flaws be so inherently toxic. I just did not vibe with this. So yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. I really wanted to enjoy this, loved the concept, loved the art, but the story just did me wrong. I also listened to a couple audiobooks this month that I don't have physical copies of. One of them was nonfiction and one of them was fantasy. So the nonfiction audiobook that I listened to was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. This is like a Q&A style book from Caitlin Doughty. I don't remember her exact jobs. She worked in like a mortuary or some kind of like death dealing profession. This answers a lot of commonly asked questions that I suppose she received after doing this. Okay, I just checked and she was a mortician, apparently also on YouTube. Good for her. I've seen a couple of her books and I've been interested in them, so I just decided to start here. Saw it on Scribd. It was really short, listened to it quickly. Generally, I would say it was pretty good. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was just kind of entertaining to listen to. Nothing groundbreaking, just kind of fun, kind of like listening to a podcast. I think I talked about this in some other video that I did this month, but I don't remember what it was. But I was talking about how I think it was my finally fall book tag, and it was like name a nonfiction that taught you something was the question. And I talked about this book and how it talks about what happens when you die on airplanes and how that's like the one thing that really stuck with me through this book. I think pretty much everything else I kind of forgot. Like it didn't stick with me super hard. That's also because I listened to it on audiobook. I didn't read it physically. Sometimes I have that problem too. If I listen to it on audiobook, it doesn't stay in my brain as easily. But yeah, overall, enjoyed it. I want to read more of her books. It was good. And then the fantasy audiobook I listened to this month was Girl, Serpent, Thorn. This is a young adult fantasy that is a standalone, which is what I'm looking for because I'm trying to get into fantasy, but these series are just like a little too much for me. I need to just find some standalones. This was perfect. This was inspired by, I think, Persian fairy tales. The author has an author's note at the end that explains all of that, and I really enjoyed hearing all of that at the end, kind of tying it all together. I almost wish I would have known all that before the story started, so I really could have recognized it going through. I really liked the concept of this story and the setup. I just found myself wanting more from it, more character development, more attention to the sapphic romance. Like I just needed a little bit more from it all. I also just felt the pacing was a little weird to me. It was like a little slow and then a little fast and then a little slow again. So yeah, like I said, this could also just be like an audiobook experience. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more had I read it physically. I appreciate this story for everything that it is and how it kind of flips the original fairy tale tropes on its head. Like this is not about a prince saving a princess, and I really like that. There were definitely some surprises in here that caught me off guard, and I feel like I would read it again physically. So all that said, it was pretty good. 3 to 4 stars, somewhere in there. So that leaves this stack of books that I read physically. I'll start with The Beautiful by Renee Audier. This is also a series, at least a duology. I know there's at least a second one called The Damned. It's a vampire story set in New Orleans. It's historical. It sounded like everything I wanted and needed. It was not everything I wanted, nor nothing that I needed. I feel like it sounds like I've had not a great reading month, but I think it was actually a fine reading month. I just read some books to like try some new things that I am not typically reading, and it just takes a while to find what you want in a new genre, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want from these like sort of fantasy novels. This is a story about a woman who was a seamstress in France or Paris. Yeah, those are the same thing. And she ends up having to flee the country. She comes to New Orleans. She lives in this like convent with all these different women. There's like a circus parade thing that's going on, and there's this guy who's really handsome, Sebastian, and people keep dying, and it gets like related to him at this place they're at, and then they gotta figure out what's going on, and it's a love story, and he's a vampire. There's like an evil person that's coming and tracking down our main character. Yeah, I think just generally, I don't know what I wanted from this book. It just like wasn't it. I didn't love the characters. I didn't really understand why it was set back in time. It just read pretty modern and didn't seem like it needed to be set in a historical time period. Yeah, I'm not going to be reading the sequel, and I don't really like this. It seems like a lot of people don't really like this. This seems to be pretty polarizing. You either love it or you don't. I'm on the don't side, but you might love it if you really like New Orleans stories, historical things, fantasy things of that sort. Another fantasy I read was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this was a 5-star read for me and one of my favorite books of all time now. I know everyone has been hyping this book up for years since it came out, and I ignored it because I read The Starless Sea First by Erin Morgenstern at the beginning of this year, and I didn't like it at all. I just didn't understand what was going on. The writing style was ridiculous to me. There was no like plot to really grab onto and follow. I just didn't like that book, so I didn't think I would like The Night Circus. I ended up getting this book because it was discounted, so I got it really cheap for like $3 or something, and I was like, I don't know, maybe one day I'll read this book. And then I got the audiobook on Libby, so then I was like, perfect opportunity, I'll just give it a try. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did, because it's one of my new favorite books of all time. It's so good. I love the writing, the atmosphere, the premise, the characters, literally everything about this book is perfect to me. If you don't know somehow, this book is about a magical traveling circus that comes out at night. There are two main characters who are pitted against each other in this competition of sorts. That's pretty much the setup. I don't think you really need to say much more than that. I just thought it was excellent. It was so good. I have no words to describe this. Like, it was so atmospheric. It was magical. It was beautiful. This is not like outwardly a romance. It's not outwardly a love story, but this is one of the most beautiful love stories I've ever read. It's perfect. You're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. I love it. It makes no sense, but I do. But I do wish I could get a hardcover copy, or just, I don't know, some kind of exclusive limited edition or something. I just want something that, like, this paperback's not doing it for me. I want something really nice. So I've been on the hunt for that. So if you have any recommendations of where to find a really nice copy of this, let me know. Then I read Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This was my first Frederick Bachman book. I have heard a lot of people talking about his stuff. I've just never picked it up. With the new release coming out, I figured I'd give this a try. And this was also a 5-star read for me. It was exactly what I needed. It went super fast paced. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me feel things. It was light and complex and easy to read, but really deep and moving, but satirical. Just a lot of adjectives I just threw at you, but that's the only way I can describe Frederick Bachman's writing. And so now I'm super curious to read other books of his to see if they're all kind of like this. So let me know if you've read others in this one, if this is like his vibe, or if this is like an anomaly, because I really liked this. It's a story about this group of people who are touring this apartment, and then a bank robber comes in and holds them all hostage. And you get really close with a lot of the different characters. They're very distinguishable, and they're all so very human and complex and flawed, just real. They're very real to read about, but they're also so zany that it's like you would never know a person like this, but it also just reminds you of every person you know. I know that doesn't make sense, but if you read the book, you would know what I'm talking about. Like, they're bizarre, but also just so mundane and human and normal. And this book touches on a lot of important topics. It touches on anxiety a lot. There's a lot of deep concepts explored in this novel, like suicide and depression, but it's done in a more light way, but it's taken seriously. I really am not sure how to describe it, but if you're sensitive to that, I would avoid this book. But yeah, this made me laugh, it made me cry. It was just the exact book I needed at exactly the right time, and I highly recommend this one. I also read Godshot by Chelsea Beaker this month. The journey of me discovering this book was first seeing the cover all over my Instagram, saying, that looks beautiful, realizing it was called Godshot, thinking it was a religious propaganda book, avoiding it with all my heart and soul, reading the synopsis, reading other reviews of it, and realizing it's about a cult and not really a religious propaganda book at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I can't say I enjoyed this book because it was very dark and heavy and disturbing to read, so it would be wrong to say I enjoyed it. But to say I thought it was a good book and that it was well written would be true. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This is Chelsea Beaker's debut novel, and I thought it was pretty good for a debut. Really solid writing here, really solid development of themes, exploration of motherhood, womanhood, etc. This is about a girl and her mother who grow up in this religious cult. The place they live is going through like a drought, doesn't rain there, the town's suffering. I really enjoyed the layering of the environmental issues with this sort of religious propaganda. Thought that was really interesting. So this girl is growing up with her mom in this sort of religious cult, and then her mom, going through a hard time, not really following things, ends up leaving. Not sure how much the synopsis says, but she ends up leaving, and then the girl's kind of trapped there. You know what? Let me read the synopsis so I don't spoil anything. The girl, Lacey May, ends up moving in with her grandma, who is also a mess, and from then on, Lacey keeps enduring these really appalling acts of all these men around her, including the pastor, who is saying that he's going to bring fertility back to the land. And then she does decide she wants to go find her mother. She ends up reading her mom's romance novels. It kind of tells you a lot in the synopsis, but this was really good, honestly, for a debut. Definitely a book you could like really dissect and read about in school. The things that happen in here are just absolutely wild, but really important themes are explored here. So I do think it's very good. Very complex. Definitely would be a good book club book. There's a lot you could talk about with this book. Also will say though, there are some content and trigger warnings in here. If you are sensitive in any way to pregnancy, in any aspect of that, any sort of fertility to pregnancy, anywhere on that spectrum, probably avoid this. I would say, yep, this one's heavy. Don't let this pretty cover deceive you. And finally, I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year. I have read everything that Ruth Ware writes. I have enjoyed all of it, I think. And then this year is the year I started seeing a lot of people critique Ruth Ware's writing. I just wasn't paying attention to it before. People just don't like her stuff that much. They don't like her characters. They don't think her plots are intriguing or surprising. And I never really like thought about it. I was also reading Ruth Ware before I was like really ingrained in paying attention to particularly booktube. I was on Bookstagram, but I don't know, I just never really thought about it. Anyway, all that to say, people are hating this. People are not liking this book. People are giving this 1 and 2 stars. And so I had really low expectations going into it because of all the things I've been seeing, all the reviews specifically of this book. I didn't think it was as bad as people are saying. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It's about this company who ends up going to this resort in this snowy place. Then there's an avalanche and they get trapped there. And then as the title suggests, they're like disappearing or murdered one by one. You have to figure out who the murderer is, what's going on, why they're murdering people. I think for the first half, this book was fine. The second half got really cheesy and weird. And the main complaint that I'm seeing and that I also had is that there are too many characters in this book and you can't keep up with them and they're not distinguishable, and there are some that are barely mentioned. Like, you could have cut out at least 4 characters out of this book and it would have made it 20% better, I think. I filmed a reading vlog of me reading this book. I have not published it yet. I'm still editing it, but I will have that up soon, so you can look out for that if you want to hear really in-depth thoughts on this book. If you're sort of like towing the line, if you like Ruth Ware, but you have heard bad things about this book in particular, I don't think this book was like bad, but also I'm not really harsh on Ruth Ware. So like, I don't know. It was a little disappointing. It wasn't a great book and I wish I hadn't anticipated it so highly. I personally really like isolated thrillers. I like snowy atmospheres, and I like when people are like being murdered or disappearing one by one and it really raises the stakes. I don't think it was done super well in here, but it wasn't trash. So that's that. Do with that what you will. I knew I was gonna forget a book, and I have. I also listened to Emma in the Night by Wendy Walker on audiobook. I always forget these audiobooks I listen to that I don't physically own, but I did listen to that. I gave that 2 out of 5 stars. Didn't really like it. Stories about these 2 sisters who end up going missing, and the story starts 3 years later when one of the sisters has returned. There's an investigator and they're trying to figure out where the girls were taken, why, where the other sister is, etc. I will say this book was very surprising and very shocking. Personally, did not like it. There are certain things that make me feel icky in thrillers, and this book did that. Once that happens, I can't look past it. Another book that did that is Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So if you liked that book and didn't have any qualms with it, then maybe you would like this one. But if you specifically had qualms with Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, then I think you would also specifically have qualms with this book. They're not the same situation, but it's just like a general ickiness. Yeah, I just don't like when like weird family things go on and then it's just not for me. But if you're into like really messy families and like kind of gross things, then like this could be your jam. Just not my jam. So that's it for all the books that I read this month. A couple of my favorites that stood out are Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jossi. So if you're looking to get anything out of this video, these are the 3 that I would highly recommend. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think, especially if you have contrary opinions to me on books that I really disliked and you liked them. Like, I definitely want to know why. Or the opposite, if I really liked a book but you hated it. Let me know that too. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.